Hafaday and good evening. The Committee on Education, Air Transportation, and Statistics Research and Planning will now convene this oversight hearing. Today is Monday, October 14th, 2019. It is now 1926. For the record and in accordance with open government law, public notices of this hearing were sent out to all senators, stakeholders, and main media broadcasting outlets on Friday, October 4th, and a second public notice on Wednesday, October 9th. We are here this evening to have a roundtable hearing with the Committee on Education and Youth Development, Senator Shelton, and who is the Oversight Chair, and then to discuss development of policy and programs for youth challenges. Okay, I'd like to thank again the Chair of Education and Youth Development for being here today. And then I'd like to open it up to the IBOX students. Thank you for being here and staying through the oversight hearing. I believe you have some testimony, so we're going to address you first because you have school tomorrow, so you have a lot of things to do. So, Mr. Chair, maybe you can start, and then you can work with the rest of the team to move forward.
And this is concerning how we can challenge the youth, or to what exactly?
Do you have a testimony that you'd like to give, or
Yes,
any concerns?
actually.
Okay, so go ahead and state your name for the record and the position you hold, and then whatever concerns and issues that you'd like to address at this time.
My name is Devin Aligio. I'm the IBOG's chairman. I have a few not concerns, but a few thoughts I've had in my head for the past maybe months since school started. It's concerning, through the oversight hearing, I thought it was worth noting that how do we stop these students from bringing alcohol and drugs into the school? How do we reach out into the community and do that? I think there's a lot of programs that exist that aim to prevent these things from happening. But I don't think that it's the lack of resources or the lack of associations that help with this. I think it's the awareness of these associations, because as a student, even though I'm not in need of these programs or these associations, I do pay attention, and I feel that there's a lack of awareness sometimes for kids like me who's just paying attention to whether or not these associations or programs are available. And if it's hard for me, who's paying attention, how much for the kids that need it, but they don't necessarily know which programs are available for them until something happens, until somebody addresses it. You know what I mean? Like, does a student have to walk into school drunk in order for somebody to tell them this is a program to help you stop doing this? Why can't we start with the kids? Why don't we start just by saying these programs are available to everybody, as opposed to just specific students who are repeating these things, like bringing alcohol into school, bringing drugs into school. I think we should make aware of these programs to everybody, not just telling these same students, so these programs are available. I don't know if I'm super clear on that.
No, and that's a very good point. You're making absolute sense. Usually there are cases where we don't even know what programs are there to assist the community. And so you're absolutely right. It's a lot of wisdom in what you're saying, because the students are not really aware of what they can do to help until they get in trouble.
Right.
So, okay, we will work with the superintendent to see what we can do to start implementing some awareness programs within the school, or perhaps dedicating a day or a competition, a poster competition or something of the like, or commercial or a video making competition to allow these programs to come into the light for the schools. Is there anything else?
Yes, it's not like a solution, but I think it's an idea toward a solution. I feel that some schools have health fairs. I'm not sure about your schools, but they host health fairs, and I feel that these health fairs only happen once a year, and maybe they shouldn't happen once a year, because during those fairs different organizations come to the school, but I don't feel they visit as much often as they need to, as opposed because of things that are happening in the schools. You know, as the rise of alcohol and drugs in the schools rise, as that increases, I feel like the visits from these organizations should increase too. You know, if these organizations visit once a year, they can't keep visiting once a year if these numbers keep rising.
Thank you for that, Devin. And I just want to reiterate what was said earlier about the bill that was recently passed. I think the governor signed it into law today for the training for the mental health first aid. This is going to help your teachers, administrators, aides recognize signs of substance abuse, recognize signs of mental health problems. And so we hope that this will address that within the students too, before an incident happens or before something bad happens.
That's all for me.
My name is Stephanie Saliva. I'm from Simon Sanchez, and I'm also an iBox rep. And adding to what Devin said about basically the consequences. So some consequences about alcohol and drug use is school suspension. And I find it unfair, school suspension, because I feel that students, like, they do something wrong and then they get suspended and they miss school, which pushes them back in their work. So I was thinking maybe we could work towards a solution that would help those students, because they are already falling back in the society, because they're dealing with all of these issues that a student shouldn't be going through at that age yet. So maybe with the right guidance or the right people helping them, we could work on that too. Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Kara Borja, JFK iBogs rep. And to reiterate what Stephanie said, yes, I want something different for suspension, because in all honesty, I don't think suspension is the way to go. Because suspension, let's say the riot, a student gets suspended for 10 days. Within that 10 days, what is the student going to do? Learn on his actions. We need to take his actions and make him learn that he has that the consequences for his actions are what he needs to understand what it is. So maybe we can turn that into community service or lunch duty services during school, so they don't miss school, like Stephanie said, and they can catch up on what they're doing. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Stephanie and Kara.
Hi, my name is Iris Pangilinan. I'm a iBogs rep from Tiden. So something that my school recently started was Sagin Hinasu, which is a place for reflection. And so things like insubordination, skipping, cigarettes and vape, instead of just giving them suspension, sending them home, when we do that, they don't learn from their mistakes and they don't reflect and see what they did wrong, and so they keep repeating that. And so Hagen and Asu, we give the student questions to reflect on, and they do, I think, makeup work during that time. And so the place they do this is in an admin's room, and things like drugs, alcohol, and fighting, depending on the severity of the situation. We will send them home for the rest of the day, and then they'll return back the day after that. And they'll go through Sagan Hinasu, and with the approval from an admin or a counselor, they will be released to class. And then things like rioting or other infractions that affect the community, the school community as a whole, they will receive the 10-day suspension, or they will go through a DAC, depending, or they will also go through Sagan Hanasu when they come back from suspension. And we also will send them to a Saturday counseling session. There's always an admin present and a counselor, and the parents of the student are there as well to kind of help the parent and the student relationship. And so that's something that Teton has started doing.
Thank you. And can you state your name again?
I'm Iris Pangilinan.
Iris, thank you. Okay. Thank you, Iris, for educating us on one of the programs that Teton High School implemented. I think that's a great program as well because you spend more time with the student and the parent, especially during the weekend, right? And on a Saturday. And so kind of also addresses the situation, why are we just suspending them for 10 days? It's a non-productive approach. In your eyes, that's how you feel, right? Okay. Is there anyone else from iBox that'd like to?
Hi, my name is Jermaine Gamboa from Southern High School. I am the iBox PRO. And I believe one thing that I think Mr. Meno, my admin, can actually second me on is, besides the fighting that currently happens within our schools, is the amount of contraband that is going within the schools. I believe when we had the search that one morning, there was, I believe, 2 tables full of just contraband, vape, you know, other stuffs that are being brought into the school. And I feel as if students are not interested in more better extracurricular activities, such as, you know, maybe sports. You know, students would rather stay home and get together with friends and, you know, not to sugarcoat it, but they would illegally use marijuana and drink alcohol while they're underage. And I believe maybe it's not a solution, but a step towards the solution is getting more outside influences into our schools to present and maybe get our students to be inspired to do something such as iBogs, or maybe even going out into the workforce and doing something that they've come to love and do besides the use of marijuana and tobacco products. And I think that's something that's pretty understated within the schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it Jimmy Gamboa?
Jermaine.
Jermaine Gamboa. Thank you,
Yes.
Jermaine.
Thank you.
Would you like to say something? No? Okay. Okay, students, thank you so much for being the representatives of Department of Education. We have noted some of the recommendations that you have. One of them is to create an awareness for the programs being offered, maybe dedicating a day or two or creating a competition for the schools. And recommendation or concern was from Stephanie and Kara, the suspensions. How can we address that without giving them 10-day suspensions because they're left to their own devices? And so it's something that we can look at, right, Mr. Superintendent? And then Iris, the concern, the Teton High School programs, the Hagani Nazu. So that's the program that Teton has implemented to address some of the concerns. Oh, Sagani Nazu. Sorry. To implement, to address some of the challenges that the student is having, but also a collaboration with the parent on the weekend. And then Jermaine, to find a way that we can address the contraband situation and the consequence that follows thereafter. Okay? Yeah. Just a sec. I want to thank you for everything that you put, but if you can come up with innovative solutions, right? Something out of the box for these students also. And if you have an idea in the future, just feel free to call our office or the superintendent so we can work with more ideas, because really an adult's way of thinking is very different from a student's way of thinking, because you guys have endless amount of resources, and you're always exploring other avenues. So if you have any further innovative things that we can implement in the schools or to help us to solve some of the challenges that we face, please know that we welcome those recommendations or ideas, okay? And Senator Shelton?
Thank you, Vice Speaker. I just wanted to ask to any of you, I know, Jermaine, you were talking about a lot of contraband that they found during the search at school. And you were talking, Devin, about awareness of different programs that are available to the students. Do you think that the students are aware of the policies of DOE, the contraband that is not allowed in school, what they're allowed to bring to school and not to bring to school, and types of behavior? Do you think that is made clear to the students? Or do you think is there something better that we can do to educate our students about those, what's allowed in school or not allowed?
Well, I think, Senator, it's they do know and they have very good knowledge of what is not able to be brought into school. But like I said, I believe it's these habits that have grown over time where it's come to a point where they would bring it to school and, use it within school campus. And I believe, like what Devin said, is the awareness of programs to get them to either slow down or stop completely, and putting that energy into something more better for the community and for themselves, such as maybe sports or iBog. So I believe, yes, the students do know and are very knowledgeable of what is being brought in, but they still choose to, bring it in and use it within our campuses.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to better understand, what the problem really is, if we're all on the same page here. So thank you very much, and I really appreciate all of your input here today.
Okay, if you'd like to stay, you may, but you're free to go. Okay? And we'll move on to the furthering the discussion on the roundtable hearing. If there's anyone you'd like to bring up, Mr. Superintendent.
We just for the benefit of the room, can we go ahead and just invite any other administrators or employees here who want to participate? So I guess the roundtable is just more of an open discussion. So we don't have any prepared testimony. We'll be there to discuss any ideas that come up.
Hi, good evening. My name is Dr. Perez. I'm the principal at Agueda Johnston Middle School, and I believe that it's my duty to speak on behalf of our school and the community and the stakeholders. So in keeping with the testimony heard from Mr. John Birch and the superintendent, I concur with everything they have testified on in terms of having a school safety at the school zone. In addition to that, one of the issues that we've had at Agueda Johnston is stray dogs. And as you know, stray dogs is not just an issue at Agueda, but island-wide. And I've been working with the mayor in terms of how do we resolve this issue, because the things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, every morning our staff has to walk around and clean all the feces on the campus, on the school grounds, on the hallways, within the classroom areas, and that's not safe for our students. So the feces, and then the possibility of them biting our students, the rabies and so forth, and they breed at the school site, so they're breeding. And when I've spoken to the mayor of ORDOT, one of the concerns that he has is that Gain is no longer accepting any dogs because they're overpopulated. And there isn't anyone out there really capturing these dogs. And so the question is, what are we going to do to help resolve this issue? Because yes, we have fence lines, we have gates, but they manage to come in eventually, because we have holes and everything else, right? The fences have been there ever since. And so the concern that we have then, I did promise my teachers, because every morning we have to deal with poops every day, right? And that's an issue for us. So how do we help resolve this issue if DPW is not part of the solution? Who else will help us with that? I mean, the mayor has suggested that maybe our staff can catch these stray dogs, but I'm not going to put my staff at risk in terms of trying to capture these stray dogs. That's going beyond what we need to do to keep our schools safe. Okay, so the stray dogs, their breeding, their feces, the possibility that they're going to bite our students or even our employees, that's an issue that I'd like that needs to be addressed. And I know that we were addressing, the issue of drugs, but ever since the passing of the recreational marijuana use, let me tell you, it is a fact, and I'm going to speak on behalf of Agata, that the number of usage and the possessions of marijuana for our students at Agata Johnston has increased. Just to let you know, alone in first quarter, from the beginning in August all the way to October, we have suspended students because of their possession of marijuana and use of marijuana, more so now than they had last year. So although it may seem minimal to some when they look at the data, and I have data if you want to look at it, right? The resources that you need in order for you to address these issues at the school site, if there is an issue, that possibility that a student may be in possession of marijuana, what do we have to do at the school? We have to do search, right? Because if we know that the possibility a student has used or is in possession, we have to make sure that there is an admin that is present along with another staff who has been trained to do the search and to do the pat down, okay? That's one resource, okay? Time. It takes time sometimes the entire day just to investigate, these marijuana uses. We have to call GPD, we have to call parents, we have to involve the nurse, of course, because safety of our students is at first if they are under the influence of drugs. And so when you take a look at all of these things, it requires a lot of resources, and that's really taxing. And what are we doing now at the school site? We're no longer in the business of educating our students. We're now almost policing every single day. And another bill that's been passed is the 14 points, the Public Law 28-45. We are held accountable to that, correct? But between August to October, we don't have subs. So now we're forced to use the school aides or whoever resources we have available at the school site to cover the absences at the school. And believe it or not, there's a lot of absences, okay? And when you think about the number of school aides that we have, which is 150 to 1, that's the ratio that we have, 150 students to 1 school aide. When you think about the number of school aides that we have to use to cover these classes that maybe have yet are to be, that are still vacant, or they're out on long-term leave, or they're military leave, or they're on sick leave, that takes away from the resources that we need for adequate personnel to do supervision, to cover the sentry, okay, and then to also do our random search, because now we're having all these issues with drugs, contrabands, and so forth. So a lot of this, even with the issue of the stray dogs, is a budget cut. Every time I call the mayor's office and ask for, assistance with this, even with the facilities and maintenance, or even with the issue of making sure that we fill vacancies. Sometimes it's all about budget cuts. So it's not just about our department that has the concerns about budget cuts, it's about other departments as well, because whatever they're affected with, it trickles down to us. So the stray dogs issue, which I believe is a major issue that we need to take care of at the school site, that because of the funding all around, from GAIN not wanting to accept any more dogs because they're overpopulated, to the mayor not having the resources to catch these dogs, to I don't know what other agencies are we going to look into to make sure that we get this situation assisted, to now the on-call substitutes not coming on board until October. So now we're having to utilize whatever manpower that we have at the school site, which is our school aides. And so when you take away the school aides from supervision, what happens? Now we're really now we're spreading whatever resources we have. We even used our office clerks to go out there because what do we do, right? We try to encourage our teachers, but honestly, of course, their work is tasking just as well, just to prepare for the classroom. So in as much as we are quick to pass bills, we need to, what is going to be the counter act for this, especially with the marijuana use? We were very quick to pass that. So what are we going to do now? Because now at the school level, we're having to deal with this issue of having to search, to go through all that process, and I've given you all the resources in order for us to even determine that a student is guilty on a level 3 offense of a use or of a possession of marijuana. So what are we going to do as a legislature to make sure that we take care of this? Because now we're left with all this responsibility at the school. We're practically just policing the school site. I feel sometimes like we're the narcotics section of GPD, because we're making sure that our kids are not going to be in harm's way with all of these drug use. And yes, we have all these great programs, but honestly, we seem to look at GDOE in a microscope with all these issues as if we're left to take care of all these problems. But it's a systemic issue, a very systemic issue that everyone has to be part of. It can't just be us. And if we're going to talk about a systemic solution, everyone in the government, every department needs to be a part of solutions for all of these issues that are being brought up today. And honestly, we work hard to educate our students. And if you take a look at our schools, public schools, we have a lot of great students. But somehow all these negative media in terms of what's happening at the school site, they tend to take away from all the positive things that's happening. And I believe that if we increase the resources in terms of teachers for career pathways, because we know for a fact that not all our students are going to go through college. We want to increase the number of electives that we have. For example, bands, school bands. We want to do sewing class, we want to do cooking class, but we are limited in the number of FTEs that we have at the school. I would love to open up a school band again at Agueda Johnston. I would love to open up a sewing class again, because honestly, when we interviewed our students last year, 8th graders, and we asked them what they would like, they really put focus on a lot of the careers that we were offering at the school site. They want to be cooks. They want to be an artist. They want to be a part of a band, but we don't have the equipments, or we don't have the fundings to buy all of these equipments. We don't have FTEs, and even we put it on our budget proposals, there isn't any money because our budget has been cut and cut and cut.
Thank you, Dr. Pears, and I want to thank you for the enormous job that you are doing at our public schools and the great work that you're doing for our students. Just to address some of the issues that you've brought up, the community involvement as far as the concern of the stray dogs, right? I was just telling the superintendent in the oversight hearing that we appropriated $360,000 from the Healthy Future Funds to the mayors to support the schools and their needs. And so really, to get a response from the mayor saying that they don't have the supplies or they don't have the money to address the concerns that you have does not suffice. So this is a communication thing that we should work out with the mayors. We also appropriate money to GAIN, to address the stray dogs here at the legislature, right? So we want to make sure that the community is involved in certain areas. So we also make sure GAIN gets a portion of the appropriation. Now, perhaps we can maybe put a timeline in and the amount of time where you're holding a dog or an animal, and if you can't find an owner, you'd have to put it down, right? I mean, it's maybe some animal lovers won't appreciate that, but if we can't adopt animals quick enough, then maybe we need to pass law to say, okay, we have to put these dogs down. We cannot hold them anymore for like 6 months to a year or maybe 3 months. We'll take a look at that to see what we can do to get rid of the stray dogs, and maybe even require a law. Like in Las Vegas, they have laws where you have to put in a chip in your dog, and you have to also neuter your dog. And if you want to breed, you have to get a breeding license. So we can look at those areas as well. And that's a due out that I owe to you. Okay, so I have to make sure I work to address your concern. You mentioned about your substitutes, right? You said that you can't hire your substitutes till October, and there's a gap. Well, for fiscal year 2020, what we tried to do was give each principal, each school, a specific appropriation. And so, as the principal, you can determine where and how you want that specific money spent. And so we went to this meeting with the principals and with the board, and really it was, I was receiving a lot of blowback from your colleagues saying that we don't want site-based management. We don't want this, we don't want that. You're cutting the superintendent's authority. And really that's not the intention. The intention was to show the principals, this is the money you're going to get for this school, this is the money we are appropriating you, and the superintendent has overall authority. If there's an emergency, he can move that money out of your school. But you as a principal, because each school differs in their needs and responsibilities, that you as a principal can determine, do I want to spend this $11 million and add substitutes? Do I want to spend it on capital improvement projects to fix canopies? Do I want to spend it on putting a band classroom together? That was the provision we tried to give the principals, the schools, in fiscal year 2020. But I received a lot of resistance. And so with further communication with the superintendent and the board, we're going to try to approach this again so that the principals can prioritize what they want without having to get approval from the central operations. The central operations will do the processing for you, but they must meet the needs of the school. And then, so I think that addresses that. We addressed your 14 points. The systemic solutions, we're also funding other agencies to assist. Maybe we need to get Department of Agriculture and see what they're doing as well with the stray dogs, because I understand that they used to collect them early in the morning or during the day. I don't know if they're still doing that, but I can work. And then you address the recreational marijuana. I too feel that we moved very quickly on this bill, and we did it in the beginning of the term. And I think that they're still trying to figure it out. So we kind of put we pushed this bill to recreationalize marijuana, but we didn't put any safeties in place to make sure that our children are protected, to make sure that how the revenue is being spent. This is what they're trying to figure out now. And so we need to keep an eye on it and see how do we use this revenue to help our students, help our schools, and help our children. Because if you're already seeing it in your school because the kids think it's okay. I remember the superintendent coming online during the bills, being heard on the floor, and after the passage saying, hey, it's still, you can't bring marijuana to school. You shouldn't be smoking marijuana. This is a drug-free zone, and so there are consequences. But apparently, if we think that it's legal, we can do whatever we want when it's legal. So I think we need to work at educating the children more, seeing how process the revenues. And I mean, they don't even have a lab up yet to test the kind of drugs that they're smoking, whether it really is marijuana or mixed with a different strain. There's no dispensaries available. There's nothing. There's nothing concrete. And so you're absolutely right. The way we did that was wrong, and I fought against it. But of course, I think you fought against it too.
But
right?
how are we going
Senator
to hold
Shelton.
parents accountable? Because we have parents that willingly give it to their children,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Even though they know they're minors, how do we hold them accountable to that?
Right, and so that's what the governor needs to figure out, because she's the one that pushed this. So, I mean, this is in all truth, right? I'm not trying to put anyone under the bus, but it's in all truth. She's the one that pushed this. We need to go to the governor's office and ask her, how is she going to hold parents accountable? How are we going to ensure that we're already seeing it affecting our children? How are we going to ensure that they're going to be safe? Because right now, they're not safe. And so this is something that, we'll still continue to work towards, and we need your help with the community. The community needs to rise up and go down to Guadalupe and say, hey, you push this on us, you force this on the people, so where are your solutions? It's already, what is
This
it?
is a round table, right? And
It's
I believe
August.
she'll know it, right?
Well, this is the truth. This is the situation that's happening in our community. I mean, we should be able to speak about these things. Yeah. You can-
Now at the school site, that hasn't been thought out very well. So yes, we satisfied, the island for whoever wants to use the recreational marijuana, but we haven't thought about what's going to be the ramification at the school level. And now, like I said, we've disrupted the education.
Yes.
In terms of trying to teach our students to learn how to read and write, which we know is an issue with our students, even at the middle school level and high school level. So now this is an added burden to the responsibility on top of everything else that we do. And in terms of the budget, I do believe that Agata Johnston did not receive its full funding, and whatever we were allocated was only enough to cover the personnel. So I don't know how I'm going to try to put where the money is needed, for example, in a band equipment, if I haven't been allotted the funding for anything else besides personnel.
Personnel. Right. Thank you, Dr. Perez, and we're going to address the FY 2021 budget with this approach again. Hopefully we can get the superintendent and the board on top of it. He's doing, I don't know, we'll see, but, and there were 6 schools that were not funded as much as the other schools, and actually I think like Ocean View Middle School was under appropriated, and so this was something that we wanted to fix when we moved forward, but we couldn't move forward with it because of the board and the principals not agreeing with the provision for each school to get a specific amount. But we'll fix that because it was a miscommunication. So make sure the superintendent has the authority, because people thought he didn't have the authority to transfer money. So yeah. Anything else? Well, I wanted to talk about.
I don't want to mention, but the clarity around the 14 Points Act is that the superintendent is responsible.
Right.
So I
So
would
we'll just
recommend
adjust-
that you, well, I wouldn't recommend anything. I'll just
Yeah.
leave it for the legislature to weigh.
Right, because ever since I became the oversight chair, I asked you, how do we justify having 2 graphic artists in item number 13, right? And so, just to break down, if we can be more specific on the requirement of the 14 points, and then we'd like to address it. Because the way the law is written, it's so vague. You can put anything in there. I can put a tetherball teacher and only make him play tetherball in the 14 points. You see what I mean? It's so ambiguous. The law is written so ambiguous. So I've been asking to see if we can, make it more specific. But really, one of the things that we, for the roundtable, right, was to discuss some of the challenges that we were having after the meeting with JFK and Teason High School. And so one of them was that from meeting with the administration was the reform school. A need for a reform school for the students, because the Success Academy is tailored to a certain type of student needs. And then the second one was the addition of SROs or something of the like. And so the reform school, we've reached out to the National Guard, the Guam National Guard, and I know you've been in communication with the TAG. And they weren't able to make it tonight, but we're going to have a follow-on roundtable so that they can present this Youth Challenge program. And I'm sure we've talked about this, and I'm sure you've done the research that the Youth Challenge program is like a 5-month or 5.5-month residency program for students that are high risk or students that would like to go to school in a more structured environment. and they are taught in the classroom. It's all federally funded. They're taught in the classroom. They have to mirror the curriculum of DOE or work with DOE to get the curriculum and also the selection criteria of who's going to enter the program. And they will also reside on campus, so they don't go home. Some of the goals is to bring their GPA up in some states. In some states, the goal is to give them a GED. And so those are some of the programs that we are going to talk about in the future. And just with the basic level discussion with the Adjutant General and her Chief of Staff is how soon can we bring this to Guam, even if it's a pilot program. And so we have to work on pushing the resolution to the Congress to ensure that they are funded also, because we need to ensure that there's an additional funding for the territory of Guam to begin the pilot program. And I think this would be the answer to the needs of the reform school. And the other one was the SROs. So we talked about that during the oversight hearing. And so basically we have to wait for the RFP and see what we can do to use the consolidated grant for a limited term employee if the RFP falls through. Right?
So, right, well, I think we'll take a lot of the comments made during the oversight into heart as we work through the SRO program. I know you expressed some, I would just say questions regarding the shift to GPD and what that would mean for the SRO program. Was there proper training? Would the officers selected be equipped to handle not just the law enforcement but the other aspects of the SRO functions? So I think that's well. Those are well-made comments. But given even if it's just given the fact that we've worked with the judiciary, so we're used to a certain level of marshal and their training, and we're shifting to another. If we shift to another organization, I think we need to be very cognizant of what that means in terms of the type of person, employee that would be working with our school children. So I think the cautionary notes that you've made are well heard here by the program, and we'll take that into account on the SROs. The reform score, again, I really want to thank you for the continued discussion on it, because I'm not resistant. I think before we used to talk about, well, are you for or against the alternative school? And it's hard to have a very nuanced discussion when we're saying there isn't just one version of an alternative school. And what I am against is an alternative location without really addressing the underlying issues. So when you talked about Youth Challenge, and I said, well, this is not only is it a different idea, it's also a different structure, and it's a different set of factors, and so it's worth looking at from that standpoint of we're not just moving students from here to here and giving them the same teachers and the same. We're actually looking at a different level of supports and focus that really is addressing a particular set of at-risk youth, and we're really talking about students who are dropping out or about to drop out, and so I think I think that's a good discussion worth having and seeing if we can bring the program. Plus it's a well-established program that we know was working in other states. So I appreciate the connection and connecting us to the Adjutant General to pursue this option. So happy to continue moving that forward.
Thank you very much, Vice Speaker. Mr. Superintendent, I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about our graduation rates and our dropout rates. Right now, I recently met with some legislators from across the country who are implementing success programs to keep students in school to graduate using, like I think you mentioned, people like the soccer team, right? Mattel, local celebrities who can encourage our students to stay in school, to tell them that they are really worth something, they have value, and they have all of this potential. And so I wanted to know if there's a way that we can really implement a program like that to help with those rates if it's needed.
So, this year we're reporting an 86.8% graduation rate, which is its highest level, at least in the last 9 years that I've seen. So, we just want to, I want to just give kudos to all the administrators who are here and also at home. And our elementary schools administrators are not here today, but, and to all the teachers and staff who work with our students every day, because I think that the benefit, I think that the progress that we've made is really, I don't think that it was made with the intent to say, let's raise the graduation rate by this much percentage. Or I think the idea was, let's work together to fulfill our mission. And that mission is to help students get to the finish line, get that piece of paper that we know is not the ticket to, is not the guarantee of success, but it's the ticket to the next step, right? And I think we've seen so many students who've dropped out, who've given up, some with our willing participation, and we just tried to change the mindset around for everybody. I think everybody's worked hard to say that, you know, whether we're elementary, middle, high school teacher or administrator or staff, our goal is to get our kids to the finish line, not simply to hand them off to the next grade or hand them off to the next school. And you know, we have put in place policy changes, we've put in place programs, we've put in place training and development, all geared in that same direction, because we know that if our students fail to get that piece of paper, whether that piece of paper means you're, you know, going to be a CEO of a company, or whether you're just going to get that first job that's going to get you on your career, we know that if you don't have that piece of paper, the likelihood that you're going to end up in much more negative circumstances is much, much higher. So we know that if you get close to that finish line but just give up that piece of paper, we need to make sure you understand the value that the diploma has, and just ensuring that you've kept that path open towards your next success in life. You know, we ran into situations where people say, you know, students say, I want to go to the military. I'm dropping out. I don't need the diploma. To realize that, no, everywhere it's changed. You need your diploma to go into the military. You need your high school diploma to get into many other areas. You can't just simply give up or say there's something else. I can get the GED and still achieve the same level of success in reaching my goals. So I think changing mindset, understanding that the expectations have grown in the workplace, especially when people say, I just want to go to the military. Well, that's a very highly selective job now. And letting them know that we're going to help them get there is important. So I do want to thank and congratulate all of the folks in this room and in the school system, because it's really taken a real effort across the school system to get our kids finishing up. And now we have more to do to make sure that the diploma means you're absolutely ready, and we're working on that with the university, with GCC. But to go in this direction has been really good to see.
Yes, thank you very much. I know I was very excited to see that number in the news, and to see the progress you all have made. So thank you for those contributions.
And let me, if I could echo, since I know you also have a dual role with the universities, but post-secondary, it's not even like getting your diploma now. Now it's getting your college degree. It's finishing up. So I do think, as you mentioned, celebrities, but really, really it's everybody. It's all the adults in the room telling young people, keep going, finish up. So don't just get your diploma and we're done. We also want you to finish college. So we want to make sure you don't give up, you don't start to work and get distracted, take care of your family issues. But the big thing is to keep working at reaching your goals. So even just having all the adults, celebrities or not, encourage our young people to finish their college degrees if they've started it. It's going to be, it's really helpful to make sure they are always keeping their eye on the prize.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Shelton. And just a caveat to that, how did the students fare nationally as far as reading level and math level?
So, without getting into all the ACT Aspire results, we tried to do that and boil it down for our Rotary discussion we were having. But essentially, there's a lot of progress that needs to be made for us to reach the benchmark level for all students in all grade levels and content areas that are tested with the ACT Aspire, which is our new assessment. But as far as English goes, students on Guam do very well. So we've seen our students hit or even exceed the benchmarks, the ACT Aspire benchmarks, indicating that they're ready, that they're on a projection for college readiness. Reading, we see good data in the earlier years. And then with math, the same, but as we get into the secondary levels, we start to see the gaps widen. I think a lot of what we've been discussing is that the key issue in reading across the board is comprehension. That they'll get the English parts right, they understand what the words are, but comprehension is where we get stuck, which is also contributing to the math issues. Once you get into more complex math and word problems and problem solving, the literacy and the reading comprehension is, we believe, contributing to both issues. So we're making progress, but we still have a lot of work to do to get where we need to be, especially in reading and math.
So can we get the scores for the
Sure.
English reading level and math level?
Sure, we can. Yeah,
We don't need
we
it
can,
now, but
yeah,
just
we can
in
do
the
that.
future.
I don't know if any Joe wants to add anything to it. We just presented the early version.
I guess one of the things that we've been discussing also with the board
Mr.
is...
Sanchez, can you just state your name?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank
Joe
you.
Sanchez, Deputy Superintendent Curriculum and Instruction. So one of the things that we're very happy to have discussed with the board is looking at our targets so that our targets actually reflect the national performance as well as other schools on the island. So we actually set really high targets of like 80%, but that was kind of done more as just kind of a aspirational target without really taking a look at what our actual performance is, as well as how well does the nation do, as well as how well do the other schools on island like the private schools do. So nationally, we're looking at about a 40 to 45% proficiency rate. So our target is proficiency and advanced. So we're looking at 40 to 45% nationally for reading, right? So that's how well the nation does. With the private schools tend to do somewhere around 35 to the highest we have so far is like 40%. So you're looking at the private schools somewhere kind of up there. Actually, all levels, yeah. So if you kind of compress and summarize all levels performance, it's around 40 to 35 to about 40%. So it's closer to the national than the public schools. The charter schools are a little different. Like one charter school does really well, the other doesn't do as well. But it's still around the 35 to 40% range, and then the other one much lower than that. For the Department of Education schools, we're actually around 20%, which is statistically not bad. I mean, when you're looking at the total numbers and our performance over time, as well as a category that's new to the ACT Aspire called Close to Ready, and we've actually confirmed this with the assessment folks, because under normal circumstances with the SAT-10, the second category, which was basic, wasn't considered to be really good. But when you look at the statistics for what's close to ready is on the assessment, they're only missing like 2 or 3 items.
20% out of 100? Is that
20% out of 100. Well, but look at the perspective. Nationally, we're at 40%. Our private schools are at 35%. And our charter schools, again, are not much higher, or in some cases are not higher at all. So we're looking at a 20% proficiency rate, which close to ready, somewhere also be around 20-some%. So if you add those two categories together, we're looking at potentially 40 to 50% proficiency, which is really around the national average.
Right. But we all know the national average compared to other countries is terribly low, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I was just reading today that, some states are even looking at revamping their whole program to see how, like, kids in Sweden fare so high or Switzerland fare so high to address that.
Yep.
But out of all of the seniors that graduate, how many of these seniors score higher than a 9th grade reading level? Can I get those numbers?
Score higher than a 9th grade reading level? Okay, so the test that we take doesn't grade them by level. It kind of grade by a grade level.
Yes.
So I'd have to check with our RPNE office to see what that would translate to a reading level.
Yes.
But the score that we're trying to use now is really proficiency from our standards-based assessment, which is the percentage of students that score at a particular category, which is supposed to be at 12th grade level. So it's either you hit the 12th grade level or you don't.
But then how do you measure proficiency?
That's the score. So the proficiency level is once you hit that would be proficient. But if you don't hit it, we don't have a leveled system after that. So if you don't hit it, it doesn't level beyond that.
But how do you define proficiency, right, as to where it was defined in the past? So,
yeah.
I'm sorry we digressed.
No, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be wordy. But
So our reporting, then when we provide all the data to the legislatures and to the governors on October 30th, as well as to the board when the final assessment. So maybe once we provide that, and then we can have a follow-up discussion. But I mean, we're doing a set of different things. So one is we got the graduation rate. We have the ACT Aspire assessment, and that always, again, it's worth discussing, but it gets into the nuanced discussion about, well, you're only at 30%, then you realize that the nation's not, it's not at 100, it's not the national benchmark is not 100%, it's around 40, and so you have to kind of try to interpret how that fits. So we can work through the ACT Aspire scores. We also have updated data around the work keys assessment. So we've used the work keys assessment to also to test for work readiness. So we've set that as a goal, and we can update you on that, as well as the remediation numbers going into GCC and UOG. So we're really looking at a set of data to try to look at college and career readiness. So it includes the standardized assessment, graduation rates, as well as these other measures. So I think the idea is to look at the whole picture, so we can understand, really where our kids are at. But we're seeing good data on remediation. That's due to the work that UOG and GCC has been doing with us around boot camps and the climbers program and so forth. And then as well as work keys, since we've implemented work keys, I think last year we had like 68 platinum.
I understand that DOE is doing a lot, and I understand that you've been trying to do your best to implement a standard for student success. I mean, you transitioned this whole SBA even when the teachers were kind of the majority of the teachers were upset about it. This change, but I understand that. My point is the national average is
but even so,
really,
right? The national average is
it's low. Like we shouldn't care. We shouldn't base ourselves on the national average. I mean, it's sad. So
that's what I'm saying. People assume that the national average is up here, but we're really
no,
everyone's doing well. Everyone's doing really hard, poorly in math.
US is really low when it comes to education. It fares pretty low, considering they're supposed to be a superpower. But I'm sorry we digressed.
Yeah, and if you think about how
So we talked about the SROs and then the Parental Accountability Act when we went to visit some of the schools to address the riots that occurred. So we do have a draft bill. Do you guys have that? Can we give them a copy? So really the draft bill is to put a left and a right limit on what parents will be accountable for. But what we need from the community is the meat, right? The concrete consequence for the parent. And so basically it just addresses some of the like almost investigative approach to holding parents accountable. But what will be the consequence? Are we going to fine them $10,000? I think at one point a state fined them like $15,000 when their student created an infraction. But then later down the line they pulled it back because parents weren't able to pay. Do we consider, to the most extreme, parental confinement?
Right.
Some states are doing parental classes on the first offense, withdrawing or holding back tax returns, or deading the tax returns if they're on the second offense. And so these are the things that we need to discuss, because I'd like to move this bill forward with some meat, but I also want to make sure that the stakeholders, including the parents, are involved. So if DOE or the board can make this initiative to bring to the PTOs and ask them if they can, what is it that the community feels is a just response to lack of parental accountability, and how do we, create a law that is fair but also holds the parents accountable? I mean, I don't want it to be like we're declaring martial law in our community, because that's really not the case. But, what resources can we put in place to help them, and what will be, if the actions continue, the continuing consequence? Like my child, I think it's okay for my child to drink alcohol at 15, 14, 13, 12, but it's absolutely wrong.
Right.
So, what consequence are we going to put in place to tell the parents it's absolutely wrong? Do we take away your EITC so you don't, or do we take away your SNAP benefits? What do we do for these parents? And then maybe, they'll realize, oh, I should not be allowing my child to drink, Maybe some of these parents are even fearful for their lives. Maybe their children are bigger than them, and they're abusive towards the parent. That does happen in some cases. I've witnessed that as a teacher. So if the board can bring this to the PTOs, and maybe the administrators bring it to the PTOs, and invite us also there when they
Right.
do meet on it, then we can have this further discussion.
So I know that, Mr. Birch, you can bring it back as well to the board, but I do know the board was looking at bringing together the representatives and of the parent-teacher organizations as well into one, sort of an island-wide meeting as well. So I'll go ahead and let the board member who was our parent representative, Carlin Borja, who was going to convene this group, and maybe this is one topic around which they can, would be a good first topic for the parents to get together. So typically we try to bring all the parent-teacher organization groups together, and then they can facilitate the discussion at their schools if they like. But at least gives us an island-wide, across the district discussion. I'll raise that for the board members for that first meeting. We're hoping to take place within the next couple of weeks, and we'll let you know as well.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Superintendent, because I would like to see, because this was a real big concern, and even meeting with the teachers, I guess they're just so frustrated that they can't get in contact with parents. The student does something wrong, the parent doesn't even show up for parent shadow. And so if we can move something like this in by December, to actually have it submitted, a bill to have this parental accountability, if we can reach out to as many stakeholders and hold continuous meetings on this, then, please invite us, because we're going to be there.
Okay.
But
Happy to do
yeah,
that.
I would need the help of the board and of course your team to move this forward with something that has teeth, right? Because right now this is a recommendation, very light, very watered down, and so we need to get a census and see where is the community really leading to, and what is fair. Like I said, some states, their jurisdictions, their parental classes. They withhold some benefits, some SNAP benefits, but we have to look at that because states' authorities with the law is very different from a territory's authority with the law. And then also they withhold the EITC, so they don't get
And for
there.
which offenses are we talking about, really, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
the
all
serious
or
offenses,
right,
yeah.
so-
So the violent one.
Right.
The ones that deal with drugs and alcohol, so.
Okay.
And then the compulsory age, I'm trying to understand this because I wasn't, in truth, I mean, anyone can look it up, but in truth, I was not here to vote on the compulsory age. I was on military duty last term, so.
Okay.
I did watch the hearing, and there were some people against the compulsory age and some people that supported it. But I really want to, really vet this out to the community again, because if it's necessary that we need to repeal the compulsory age because you have 20-year-olds in school, 19-year-olds in school, maybe we just need to define it and make it more specific to what it is, because it's pretty vague, the law, so maybe we need to put some.
More data behind
Yeah,
what we're
definitions,
looking at.
right.
So I think like you said, it's recently enacted, and when the discussion was before with the public hearing before the legislature, there was I'm sure that, DOE was at the table, and I think our concern was that while it's a lofty goal to set and say that everybody should, basically everybody should complete their high school education and get their diploma, and so maybe forcing, students to be there till they're 18 will help do that. The concern was that, and we can see these in particular instances, if you're 16 and 17 showing freshman, credits, you're behind already. You're not really interested in being at school. You're getting older, and you opt to drop out. If we force you to stay, what changes? And I think our issue is that if you're just forcing the student to stay who might otherwise have dropped out, we end up with a student who's in school, still failing, still not on track, but now, is the responsibility of the school campuses. So I think our concern was, without any additional interventions or any change in how the student's going to be resourced or, or any interventions, we're just holding a student back, in what we called a holding pattern until they turn 18 and then they leave. So that was our concern, that we would start to see that, and it was our responsibility to deal with them, but nothing else was changing besides the law. Now, we've got 1 year under our belt, and I know that when we looked at this last round of expulsions, when we provide you that data, you will see we have a number of students who are freshmen, sophomore credits who should be juniors and seniors, And so again, we'd have to have the discussion: is there a correlation? There's not a correlation. What are the alternatives, for those students? But we do know if you're falling behind, if you're behind already, and you're not going to find a way to catch up, holding you back 2 more years to fall further behind is, it's our responsibility without, necessarily any solutions. I think that's the concern, and I know you don't have as much data because we just implemented it. But what we'll try to do is maybe articulate that argument for you as we go forward. I know that it is I think the idea is that in concept, that's what we were arguing against, and we know that anecdotally, we can probably see those instances where students who probably wouldn't be on campus are still hanging around, and then causing trouble. But it merits more data from our side, and we'll try to get that together.
Thank you. So just to reiterate, we were addressing the SROs concerning the school safety. We are working on the Parental Accountability Act, and then redefining the compulsory age law. That was in response to the riots, and so that's why we wanted. And then also we were working with the National Guard, hoping that they can bring in the Youth Challenge program. Yep. And there was also talk about them expanding it to areas of Saipan and CNMI, that they can come to Guam as well. These students can come to Guam and get this kind of support and schooling. I think it'll be good because we're constantly noticing that it's the sociological factor, right? It's really stemming from home, a lot of the issues. So if we can keep these kids in residence and allow them to learn and be integrated and teach them new skills and provide counseling services, right. Of course it has to be, the policy created with a DO, perhaps a curriculum that DOE can assist, or selection criteria to enter the program, then that would really alleviate the 2% that right. DOE faces, right? And that they spend, that DOE spends to mitigate the 2%. And the time. So hopefully it's going to happen, but it takes maybe like 2 years to
we have
really
to persist at it,
right. So I'm asking if there's a way we can expedite the process. Is there a way we can do a pilot program so we can start taking kids in within like the next school year? Okay. And so those are the things that when we meet again, that the National Guard will give us a presentation on what the new Youth Challenge program really is. So yes, so we will meet again.
Okay.
And then to see if we can finalize the law for the parental accountability, the compulsory age, and then the Youth Challenge program. And okay. I think that's it. Is there any other? Just
regarding Youth Challenge, I think like you mentioned, there are other examples, different charter schools might have tried this, where what they're really getting at is the environment, that a student who's going to school but going back to an environment which is unproductive or unhealthy for that student to continue to make progress in school. What they've done is said, okay, we're going to take you, we're going to set you in a completely different environment for a more extended period of time, so you get that level of support and really make that change in mindset, and without all the other distractions and issues that you're dealing with at home. So it's been that model might help with those who really are struggling to stay on the right path, but have to deal with different factors that are pulling them in a different direction at home.
Okay, so are there any other concerns? Mr. Meno, do you see anything? You look like you want to say something, so.
No, Michael Meno, Southern High School. I just wanted to give a positive perspective on this. So at Southern High, one of the campaigns that we're going through right now, right, is to rebrand the school. So we're seeing that high percentage of graduation happening across the district. So if you look at Southern High, we have 311 cohort seniors, and 272 of them are on track to graduate. So we have 27 students who are high risk, and we're focusing on getting them back on track. It may not happen within this school year, but we're looking long-term wise. We want to make sure that they do graduate. So this is where I'm really excited about what the district has been offering, like e-campuses, partnerships with Asmujao. So we're using the graduation plan as the basis of intervention. And we can actually leverage the resources for these students. So I'm very proud to say that Jermaine is also our SBA vice president. And part of the campaign is to get all the students to have better information so that they can be accountable to their graduation plan. And we want them to commit to it. So when we look at the behaviors, every month we report the ABCs. It's attendance, behavior, and course performance. We're presenting it to all the stakeholders in the language that they can understand. So Jermaine is part of that group that we're using, to leverage this communication through the students. They've organized activities. They took a stand against the riots. They're trying to get the word out through the kids and through their parents that there's more to Southern High than the media portrays. And that's part of that rebranding. So I'm really excited because we have the support of the superintendent, the board, and we have the rest of the year to show that we're more compelling as a school because of the programs and the successes as opposed to the bad press they've been receiving. And I just wanted to make sure I shared that tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Meno. That is a breath of fresh air.
And if I could make one comment, because the students mentioned a lot of different things, but one thing that stood out to me from Mr. Devin's comments was that students need to learn more about what's available. So I've been talking with our nurses and our other professionals, our psychologists. The whole direction that we'd like to go in the event that resources are available and we're able to move is to provide more school-based services. So not having to deal, obviously in partnership with our outside agencies, but how do we deliver some of those supports at school? Right now, we do focus on the kids who get in trouble because we have limited capacity, but can you imagine if we were able to provide more proactive, preventative services at the site? And I think that's kind of a vision for down the road. It'd be nice to be able to provide those supports at every school site because they're the anchor parts of the village, or it doesn't have to be every school, but if we could provide it so that we have the kids there all day, if they can avail themselves of services there, that's a different model, but it really looks at the school as the anchor for kids' wellness and services. So just I thought it was nice for him to mention that.
Can I add one more thing? We shared through Inram Middle School grief recovery. So we're looking at these 27 students, and I was actually helping my daughter with her homework at UOG, and she shared with me an article about drugs and drug addiction and why certain groups are addicted to it. So alcohol will be linked to restlessness, anger with, I believe, cocaine. So there was merit in that study, and I asked my daughter to email it to me tonight because we were talking about it. When I look at those 27 students and I look at their behavior and their history, if it links to alcohol, this is where grief recovery comes into mind, and we went through the first mental health first aid. And there's an attachment theory that has been surfacing. When kids experience trauma, it's a loss to them. And their process to grieve and to deal with their emotions is not working correctly, and it's called internal working model. So they turn to other things like alcohol to deal with those emotions that they can't handle. So those are the things that I'm bringing to my committee. So when we suspend a kid, right, we have to based on procedures, but we also look at 5 days into the suspension, 3 days into the suspension, we want to bring the parents in and bring that information together because a lot of the times we don't have that information provided to us from the home. And we have to bring that out. We have to talk about it. Dexter and I always talk about this. It's the undiscussables. No one wants to talk about it, but we have to. And I just thought that was interesting. We were able to get Marcella Takai to receive that grief recovery training. And that's something I wanted to promote within the school because these 27 students, we don't want to discount them. We want to help them. But we also want to learn from our experience with those students. And I've shared that with my APs. It actually helps us become better at what we do because we're better informed with these issues that we weren't trained for. And I appreciate the divisions coming to the schools and giving us that support. So we're looking at reaching into their project activities to see if we can get that training and support at the school level. Because when you think about it, we've actually drawn the line between what we're good at, and that's educating the students, and what we're not good at. So this is where we need to link them to the right services. So Jermaine was absolutely right. They're not aware. We need to inform them, and we need to give them better information about what they can actually receive. Because a lot of our students, we train them, we teach them on civic engagement, but they're not experiencing citizenship the way we think they should. They're unguided, they're not, they're misguided, they're left unattended, they're doing adult level misconduct. So that's one of the things that we wanted to address through this process.
Thank you, Mr. Meno. I believe we exhausted all the items on the agenda for this roundtable hearing. We'll have a follow-up. I'd like to thank again you, the board, the deputies, for teachers and principals for staying late, and also the iBox student. I really appreciate them coming out and sharing their concerns. So without further ado, it is 20:41. Thank you, everyone. Good night and God bless.